2024 has been a challenging year for Turkey, both security-wise and on the diplomatic front. Israel's prolonged assault on Gaza has spilled into Lebanon and even reached into Iran. Meanwhile, the war in Ukraine escalated as the United States approved Kyiv's use of long-range missiles against Russia. And in Syria, a surprise offensive by opposition groups has reignited the front lines in a 13-year conflict. The Syrian opposition has reportedly seized parts of Aleppo, prompting Russian airstrikes across the city. Ankara has urged all sides to prevent further escalation, warning of a broader instability. Analysts say anti-regime forces in Syria may have exploited the world's focus on Israel and Lebanon, where a fragile ceasefire holds. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan has consistently called for an end to Israel's bombardment of Gaza and Lebanon. Meanwhile, Russia has stepped up its threats against Ukraine, warning it could target countries that provide weapons to Kyiv. Turkey, which brokered the 2022 grain deal, has renewed its offer to mediate amid heightened tensions. And with Donald Trump returning to the White House, can Erdogan's personal relationship with the president-elect help stabilize a region on the brink? Joining me now to review how Turkey has navigated the many challenges during this chaotic year, I'm pleased to be in the studio with the Turkish president's foreign policy and security advisor, Ambassador Akif Çağatay Kılıç. Now, very hectic year for Turkey. I want to begin with probably the most pressing issue, I would say Syria. Now, obviously, it's an issue that's 13 years old. How is Ankara reading the current situation right now? What's going on south of the border?
Well, first of all, of course, we have to bear in mind that, like you said, it's a conflict that has been going on for 13 years. So there's quite a lot of issues that have arisen since the start. There are some core issues that you have to tackle, but there's also things that developed during the last 13 years. So it's a hectic situation, to say the least. And of course, we have to follow it very closely. A lot of cooperation is needed with a lot of different actors. These are sometimes states, sometimes people on the ground, and of course, people who are living there. Because the main concern that we have is for human life. And in that sense, we have to be very vigilant to protect human life to the utmost extent, but also to protect the Turkish borders and the general situation in the region, because as you know, anything that happens in Syria has the capability and possibility to affect other areas in the region as well. So we are trying to have a very close eye on what's developing there. And in recent days, as you know, there is some movement happening in different parts of the country. These have to be followed up very closely. We are confident that in the future we can establish a viable and livable future for the people who are living there, but also for the people who want to go back to their homes. Because as you know, there is a high amount of refugees concentrated also in Turkey, and a lot of them want to go back to their hometowns, to their homes. And in that sense, in the different parts of the region, we are working to find these safe spots and safe places where people can go back. And as you know, the primary expectation from our partners that we have in the region and the shift that we want to see is the total cutoff of the support for the PKK and its offshoots. They have been destabilizing not only in Syria, in the region, but also they have been trying to destabilize the border with Syria, not only in Syria, but also in Iraq, on the Turkish border. So our primary concern with our partners is, of course, the eradication of the PKK and its offshoots, the YPG and PYD. So that's it. But like I said, our main concern is the preservation of human life and a representation of all the different groups that are living in the area to have a viable future, to live in peace and together.
It seems like the PKK is trying to expand its footprint with recent actions now. How alarming is this for Turkish national security, and what type of defensive posture would the Turkish security apparatus take?
Well, there's, for us, the PKK's existence and in any shape or form is unacceptable. We will not in any way accept a region that is, so to say, I'm not saying it is, but so to say, organized or governed in any way or shape or form by the PKK or its offshoots. So our president has made that very clear since a long time now, and our posture is also there to secure our border from any kind of infiltration or attempted infiltration from the Syrian territory into Turkey. But at the same time, we also have to be very vigilant, and we are vigilant, in the partnerships that are sometimes being formed. And unfortunately, being at the southern flank and southeastern flank of NATO, we, from time to time, do not get the necessary and rightly expected support from our NATO allies. Mm-hmm. Not always, but sometimes. And in this sense, I think we have to also, and we are engaging with our partners and explaining to them, there is a better understanding of what the PKK and its offshoots are. So in that sense, it's positive. But from time to time, there's still need to clarification regarding the intentions and actions. Still some circles overseas, by overseas I mean outside of Turkey, see some of the affiliates of the PKK as people or groups that they could be working with for certain things, but we are outright saying this is unacceptable, we will not accept this, and we will also not give the room for them to do this, because the security of our country and the security of our people, the Turkish people, is paramount for us. This is a national security issue and an existential threat to Turkey's future. So we are ready to fight this in any way we can, and we will.
U.S. President-elect, let's call him Donald Trump, and I know this is a year in review, but I have the opportunity to talk to you right now, and I want to benefit from that opportunity to the maximum. Right after he got elected, I saw a couple of videos, one with Vice President-elect J.D. Vance and another cabinet member, Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr., and they both talked about Syria, and they both talked about the president's will to still withdraw from Syria. Is that an area of cooperation that could exist when the Trump administration comes in January 20th? Is that something Ankara would entertain or want to sit down and talk with the new incoming administration?
Well, the American system, of course, in itself is a very interesting system. Now, to that end, the American people have spoken. They have elected a new president, and President Trump is now, President-elect Trump is now getting ready to take office on the 20th of January. However, the American system gives you this interesting challenge, if you will, of a transition period. Now, we know that from our talks and the public statements that we have seen, that the transition will be, that's the aim, will be a smooth transition from the Biden administration to the Trump administration. Now, the world is hoping for that, and we are hoping for that as well. As you mentioned, there is, of course, during the election campaign as well, there have been a lot of topics that have been addressed. And the Middle East, generally the Gulf area, and the neighborhood that we are in geographically has also been on the agenda. And certainly Syria, Iraq, and all countries that are around us, also the war in Ukraine, and between Ukraine and Russia. So all these topics have to be taken into account when we are looking into the future aspect of working together. We are ready to work with the new administration, but I can sense and feel that there is a way of looking into Syria in the sense that the conflict there, how can it be resolved on one hand, but also from an American point of view, from the US point of view, how they can diminish let's say, the threat to their personnel which is on the ground. So in that sense, we have, of course, a certain projection of what might be and might not be, but this is talking towards the future, as we're talking what happened in the past, because this is a review of a year. Now we have seen certain things develop. We have a certain experience in what might and might not happen. We have different scenarios on the table, but we have also the truth on the table. I mean, our foreign ministry, our intelligence, and different organizations within the state system, of course, and also our Ministry of Defense. They're looking at different scenarios and what can happen in the future and how we can approach this. You have to also take into account it's not only a US approach that we have to look into, we also have to look into the European approach, which we are part of, as being a country which is also based in Europe. So there's a lot of different factors, but I think there's the situation in Syria and the developments in Syria will be high on the agenda of the Trump administration, as it is now also very highly on the agenda of the Biden administration. And especially now in the transition period, we can see that there's a lot of things that we have to talk to. We are talking. We have day-to-day contacts with our counterparts in different levels, of course. And the president is following it up very closely. So we are informing our president. And I'm sure that the teams in the US are also informing their president and the president-elect on what is happening. But this is going to be something that is going to be high on our agenda, how we proceed to the future. Because as everybody knows, we know the region. We are active in the region in the sense that we have to be because it's our neighborhood. We have kinships in Syria and in Iraq and in other countries. So it's a first-hand issue for us. It's not like the second, third, or fourth pillar of issues. It's a first-hand subject that we have to look into because it's also our responsibility.
The major issue of the year, obviously, war on Gaza. When we look at October 7th, 2023 to now in December 2024, a little over a year, when you're evaluating the situation, what has happened, the way the international community has reacted to it, the way the Muslim world has reacted to it, Turkey's position inside of those bigger communities and also its position bilaterally against Israel or bilaterally in support of Palestinians. How are you evaluating this situation? Are we in a better place now than we were at the beginning of the year?
I think we have to look into the situation that is developing in Palestine and Israel and Gaza with a lot of lessons that we have to learn for the future. The international community's response, unfortunately, was too quiet. And when there was a response, given, it was more of a response by talking, statements. The actions behind those statements were lacking. Now, we as Turkey and our president has been extremely vocal and a very tough stance towards the government of Israel, the Netanyahu government, which is responsible for the bloodshed and the killing that has been happening over a year now, since over a year. I think the main problem that we're having is the attitude and the angle from which a lot of countries are looking to the issue. Now, if you're looking only from the angle and saying, well, they have the right to defend themselves, defending yourself is something else. Making or doing a genocide against the people is something else. Right now, the people living in Gaza and in Palestine are being the target of a genocide. Why do we know this? Because in his own words, Netanyahu and his government's aim is to eradicate. If you're saying we want to eradicate this or that fraction, political party, organization, and you're flat out bombing and killing everybody who is in your way without making the distinction of if they're either children, women, civilians, elderly people, what else do you need for this to be categorized as a genocide against the people? Now, I think the main approach, like I said, the difference here is that this horrendous act that has been done, perpetrated by the government of Israel, of today's government, with Netanyahu being at its head, and we have seen that the International Criminal Court has now also put certain provisions against Netanyahu and his members of his government. We can see that this development that we have seen in the world is dividing, unfortunately, a lot of the social structures and also the trust into international organizations.
I want to ask you about that. How detrimental is this to the post-World War II system? Because you have the UN, which is supposed to broker peace and create this ceasefire type of scenario, but there's constant vetoes on the UN Security Council level. You have the ICC passing judgment, but you have some countries saying, I will not enforce or implement this judgment, especially those who have signed the Rome Convention. So what does that signal to other countries that are watching all this happen, that Israel has this carte blanche, while other countries are judged to a much harsher standard? Is this, do we need a new system, or is this the end of the old system as we know it? And if it is, what are we shifting into?
I think we have to see this in the following. You have to look at the facts. Now, when we say in Gaza and the West Bank, more than 50,000 Palestinian civilians have been murdered. Yeah? We are using the word murdered here knowingly and informed. And 80% of them is women and children. Then we have very much strong ground to say that the international community has failed to protect those civilians. I think everybody can agree on this. 2.3 million Palestinian civilians have been under full blockade and been deprived of basic human services: food, shelter, education. All these attributes that we're seeing, we thought would have been not allowed under the international rules-based organization that we have produced after the Second World War. Because the Second World War, in different numbers, was exactly the same what we just categorized, you know? Deprivation of freedom, deprivation of life, of basic human services, and to a certain extent, eradication of a people. So when we're looking at it from this point of view, the international system has failed in Gaza and the West Bank, and in longer term, the Palestinian people, who don't have a state, who were forced out of their homes, who were relocated from their own land to live in some other place, and the international community has been quiet. So when we're talking about this, the United Nations, the Council of Europe, and different organizations who should have been protecting the Palestinian people, have failed to do so. So this system needs to be reformed. And as our president has been saying for years now, because the world is bigger than five, this slogan that the president is using, that President Erdogan is using, is not just a slogan. It fills the mistrust and the lack of trust of the people in the world towards the United Nations security system. Mm-hmm. You have the United Nations Security Council made of the five big powers as they were referred to after the Second World War. But today, everybody is just blocking the other's proposals. You
can see more and more leaders now subscribing to that world is bigger than five mentality also.
Exactly.
I mean, when Erdogan first said it in 2016, it was revolutionary. Now it's almost the mainstream thought amongst everyone. It's like, yeah, we need to reform. We saw this at the G20.
Exactly.
Many leaders talking about it.
Not only at the G20, at the United Nations, when certain motions were proposed against Israel, in the sense for a ceasefire and declaring what has been happening a genocide, what is happening being murder, and all these motions that were set, these resolutions, got more votes than anything nearly was ever voted in the United Nations, in the General Assembly, not in the Security Council. Now that sends a clear signal when you have more than 120, 130, 140 votes in favor of these resolutions that are condemning Israel because of the government's actions, the current government of Netanyahu's actions. There's an outcry for reform. We are not saying that the United Nations should be abolished. Some people are saying that what President Erdogan has said might be thinking like, but that's not it. We are saying reform is needed. We need to be true to our beliefs, our values, and how we are going to protect these values. Double standards, as you mentioned them, double standards towards different countries is what has brought us here today. And unfortunately, in Gaza and the West Bank and in Palestine, double standards can no longer be hidden.
Another big concern since the beginning of the year, a lot of talk, was this going to become a regional war? I think developments show that it's headed in that direction. If not, it's already there. I want to talk about Lebanon first. What's going on there, the skirmish and the conflict between Hezbollah and Israel. How are you viewing this? How is Ankara viewing this situation? How concerned are they right now? There seems to be a very fragile ceasefire that seems to be holding. What are your expectations?
Well, the spillover effect that we were always warning against did happen in Lebanon. So Israel has unfortunately been able to attack certain targets in southern Lebanon, but also in Beirut. So this is the spillover effect that we were talking about. Right now, it's in the sense that there is, as you said, a ceasefire, which hasn't been easy to, which was not easy to achieve. Thankfully, that was achieved, and now we're looking towards Gaza. Now, of course, we are concerned because it's fragile, in the sense that any kind of attack from some party or something can ignite another conflict. So, in that sense, we have to be very, very vigilant and quick in order to get about a ceasefire, unconditional ceasefire, in order for negotiations for Gaza and the West Bank and in general Palestine to go on. We have been saying from the day one, hostages should not be there, they should be freed. But at the same time, we're saying a two-state solution, which is supported by the international community, with East Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine, should be established. Now, this is the basis that the world has to work on, and the borders of 1967. So there's no dispute if on this. The issue is that, and you know the region as well, we live in this region. Sometimes when people are far away geographically, they cannot put the immense hurdle that we have to go through and the immense suffering that people are going through. Geographically, we are close. Historically, we are close. Emotionally, we are close. But there's another thing. We had some visitors this year, of course, from different places of the world. We also as well, I had some of my colleagues here. There was an interesting quote from one of my colleagues who is not living in the area geographically. I don't want to mention the country's name, but geographically a bit distanced. But for example, he said that in his country, people could no longer stand at home and inside after what they have been seeing on television, on the internet, on different platforms regarding what was happening in Gaza and Palestine in general. So people had to emotionally make a statement, give a reaction. This is where we are, and that's why we're saying a ceasefire is paramount for all the issues that have to be discussed to be discussed. Now, up until today, Netanyahu's government has been, and he himself, has been opposed to all these things. Something we have been able to achieve in Lebanon, together with a lot of partners, and we're going to work towards this aim in Gaza as well. And the main aim is, of course, to cool things down in order to prevent any kind of spillover into any country. Because it's not only Lebanon. I mean, we have to be...
It's not.
It's not only Lebanon.
I want to continue connecting the dots, actually. We had Syria, we connected the dot to Gaza, we connected the dot to Lebanon. I think right now what everyone's biggest nightmare is...
In Jordan as well.
Yes, but everyone's biggest nightmare in Israel-Iran war. Yeah. This is something that nobody wants to see.
Exactly.
We've seen rhetorical back and forths over the decades, but this year we saw something unprecedented. We saw kinetic engagement between both sides. How concerning is this?
Oh, it's concerning. I mean, we can't sit here and say there's no concern or we shouldn't be vigilant about it. It's a concern. It's a serious concern. Iran being on one side and Israel being on the other side in the region, geographically. And we as Turkey are sort of in the geographical sense in the middle. Now there's of course Syria and Iraq in direct middle geographical position, but we are in the region and there's a lot of possibility of a lot of things going wrong if these two countries get to active military conflict. I don't even want to call it war. You know, if a military conflict with arms is high potential disaster for the region. So we have to be extra vigilant. We have to engage with a lot of the regional players, regional organizations and regional countries, but also with the international community, and try to prevent this. Now, it doesn't help when a lot of countries or interested parties from far away come in there and try to organize something which culturally is unacceptable or socially is unacceptable. So we have to be very active in working together to try and cool things down. And if there's an issue that has to be discussed, if there's an issue that has to be resolved, come to the negotiating table and sit down and use diplomacy. Like you said, we have seen certain amount of reprisals towards each other from both sides, but it seems a bit more calm these days, and I'm hoping it stays that way, but all our efforts are to keep it that way.
2024, a year that's not short on war, so let's move to another war, war in Ukraine. Much of the year, it's been quiet when we look at the previous 2 years, but very recently, it looks like it's really beginning to heat up right now. The US and many EU countries allowing Ukraine to use long-range missiles that are reaching deep into Russia. Russia countering by using new advanced weapons, hypersonic missiles. Where is this going? Are we on the verge of seeing Russia use a nuclear weapon? Are we close to peace? There's a new administration coming in Washington that says they want peace. The Turkish president wants peace. Hungarian prime minister wants peace. But these are only 3 actors we've counted. Much of the world doesn't seem that they want to get too close to diplomacy, that they want to continue with the military and financial aid. Where is Turkey right now on this issue?
I think our engagement and our track record speaks for itself. Since the war in Ukraine started, both sides have met openly twice, one in Istanbul and one in Antalya, so both were in Turkey. There was nearly a peace deal reached in the presence of the President Erdogan in Turkey and Istanbul, but it was unfortunately not achieved, and we couldn't go to the finish line. But I think our viewers and people who are active in the political scene and international relations by now have been able to deduct why that didn't happen.
I think it's public knowledge now.
Yeah, well, I have to be diplomatic on this, but I can pretty much look into the past and say that there's a lot of lessons that we can learn there. Definitely. Now, we had a lot of engagements. We're still engaging on that. I'm not going to sit here and say, look, if a country has nuclear capabilities and powers, Russia being one of them, the United States being the other one, and certain other countries that are in the vicinity do have, that this is a reality that we have to see, accept, and adapt accordingly.
Well, what's scary, it seems like the U.S. has based its calculations around Russia as bluffing and not going to use its nuclear weapons, but the Russians seem quite serious. They've already demonstrated the capability to deliver a nuclear warhead. So, I mean, the next step, at least logically, would be to deliver that warhead. And, I mean, that's very, very concerning. You have Trump coming in. You have an April 2022 peace plan that was agreed upon, as you said. Do you think that peace plan could be a roadmap for Trump? And would the Turkish president, if called upon, want to work together with Trump and support him on this initiative?
On the second, of course, I can't speak for the president, but from what we have seen in the last 2 years and our working relationship, which is a close relationship, any effort towards peace is going to be supported by President Erdogan. I mean, he wants peace in the region. He wants both countries to look at their differences from a diplomatic standpoint of view, rather than an armed conflict or a war. But coming back on the nuclear issue, of course there is the capability of Russia using their nuclear arsenal, which we hope and want not to see. And that's all the effort that we are putting in. I hope it stays there where the capabilities have been shown. Of course, there is now, like you said, a new administration coming in the U.S. They said during the election campaign, President Trump during the election campaign, has repeatedly said that he wants to achieve peace as soon as possible. This is a positive point, but of course we have to look to reach a viable peace solution. You mentioned some other countries that are not very vocal on peace. I think everybody wants to achieve peace, but there is a difference in the modalities and the way how to reach it. Now, we have taken part in different meetings on different levels. I myself was part in different meetings regarding the working up towards a peace conference, if you will, that was it called in those days. But we have always said from the first day, and that was the instruction of our president, the involvement of both parties has to be achieved, of both parties who are at war right now. If you don't have both parties on the table, you cannot achieve a peace deal or result or any kind of stoppage on the armed conflict. So that has to be achieved, but we are certainly going to be on the side of peace. And who knows, yes, maybe our roadmap our negotiation and the paper that we put out in the past and the points that were discussed during that first meeting in Istanbul could be a roadmap. But of course, we first have to see the 20th of January so that the new administration in the US takes over. But during that time, I mean, we have to be extra vigilant and we have to work towards calming the situation. Because in a nuclear world, where nuclear weapons are at disposal to be used, of course it's very dangerous and that shouldn't happen. And that's all our aim. And we are not saying it's going to happen tomorrow. But like you said, they have the capability. So we have to be extra vigilant so it doesn't happen.
It's definitely a scary situation.
Yeah. And I don't think that anybody wants to see that, including the both parties that are at war right now with each other.
I want to move on to the BRICS. I think this is probably one of the most important days of the year when Turkey became a partner country, not a full member, but a partner country in the BRICS. A lot of people viewed it as a potential axis shift. A lot of people were asking the questions, is BRICS and NATO compatible? What was behind the decision-making to join BRICS? And is Turkey still in the Western camp, or now is it have one foot in each?
I think we have to make a correction there. We are not a member or partner country of BRICS yet. Nobody has been offered a membership to BRICS at the last summit in Kazan. There were certain countries that have been offered, including Turkey, a partnership status. And right now, our relevant ministries and organizations are looking into what it is and what it is not. So we have not yet decided what we are going to do.
So we haven't accepted the invitation.
No, we haven't yet accepted any invitation.
I want to get the rhetoric straight.
Yeah,
correct.
we haven't.
Full member, partner country. These are two different things.
Exactly.
We've been offered a partner country status, but we have not accepted that
No,
yet.
we have not accepted it as Turkey yet because no country has been offered a membership. And we also have to understand, of course, how BRICS is working. You know, it's a organization of countries that have come together, but how are they operating under BRICS? You know, what is their different approach to certain issues, and what is the organization itself?
Why is it attractive for Turkey? What is Turkey seeing when it looks at it?
When we look at it, of course, it's a huge amount of economical area that is covered by these countries. I mean, Brazil, Russia, China. You know, these are countries that are economically very wide-ranging and big economies. And of course, in the world of today, everybody wants to have connections with each other and find alternative markets, alternative production capabilities, share technology. And this is what we're looking at, and we're doing it as a country which is a negotiating country for full membership with the EU, as a NATO member as well.
I was just going to ask you about that. Turkey-EU relations then. Very stagnant for many years. It looks like there's some rekindling. At the last European Political Community Summit, Turkish president was in Budapest, had many, many meetings.
Yes.
Do you think 2025 might be the year we might see some movement between Brussels and Ankara?
Well, following that relationship for long years now, I mean, I was in 2004 also part of the delegation and involved in the negotiations. Then when we started or got the go ahead to start the negotiation process with the EU regarding the full membership, we have to break it down. You know, yes, it has been quite stagnant for some years now, but there's some movement, like you said. And I think if the EU wants to be anything but influential in the world, it needs Turkey as an institution. Of course, we have bilateral relations with different countries, EU countries on different levels. The UK has exited the EU, so we have a bilateral relationship and bilateral trade relationship and political relationship with the UK now. But the remaining EU countries, we also have bilateral strong ties. Germany being one of those countries, of course, more than 3 million Turkish people or people with Turkish descent are living in Germany. In France, more than 500,000. In Holland, around 400,000. In Italy, the number is not low either. So in Austria, quite a number. So all these countries have actually a large Turkish community already living in those countries. So from that perspective, those countries have a EU member Turkish community within themselves. But the relationship regarding Turkey and the EU, the EU has not been following through on its promises towards Turkey on a lot of issues. Yes, we have some homework to do ourselves as well. We are not saying that Turkey doesn't have to do anything. But what we're saying is, if this is a negotiation process, then let's come down and sit and negotiate. And it was not us who stopped. It was French President Sarkozy in his days, with his attribute or his attitude towards Turkey, that derailed that process. And unfortunately, German Chancellor Merkel, she said she's going to abide by previous agreements, but her heart was not in the negotiation process. So she also stood at the sidelines, and she didn't intervene in the sense that, look, there is a negotiation process that we have to go further, so let's do it. Today, when we look at it, the new leadership of the EU, you know, and the EU countries that are responsible for working together on this, the new leadership of the EU, I think, is more pro negotiation, in the sense that we have to sit down and look at these things. But there's one problem that probably is coming and arising in Europe, and that is the rise of the far right. So we have to follow that very closely. There's going to be elections in Germany, which is the biggest country, both economically and population-wise in Europe. They're going to have an election on the 23rd of February, I think, next year in 2025. The rise of the far right in Holland, we have seen that. I mean, this person who calls himself a politician but is anything but a politician, Geert Wilders. I don't even want to mention his name, but we have to put a name to the face, which is not very pretty, to be honest, in the sense that what he's saying and what he's doing towards the Muslim community, different people who have different backgrounds in Europe, and his attributes towards Turkey in general. And he's crossing the line also with his rhetoric and regarding public servants in Turkey and also towards the highest office in Turkey. So he's not a person we should be taking seriously in that sense. But it's alarming that these people have the capability to come in so high number. That is a problem for the European Union and the countries there. But it affects us in the sense that the rise of the far right in the European continent, but also for that matter in other places in the world, is concerning. So we have to follow that one up.
It's a reality that it's a political reality. We've touched on a lot of hot spots for Turkish foreign policy. One last destination remaining, the biggest destination, the United States. How do you view this year in foreign policy relations, and what's your expectation for 2025?
Well, there is going to be a new administration, like we talked about. So they're going to take the responsibility in office on the 20th of January. They have started to give a picture of, or the names of who they want to be working with. I have my counterpart's name, so we are trying to to have a connection there and to establish a contact. Different organizations within our states and also agencies and ministries are seeing who might be their counterparts. So we're preparing for that. But it's going to be a new time. It's going to be a new administration. We know from the past that President Trump is extremely high alert on trade issues. It's going to be probably agenda number 1, 2. But we know that they're also very much want to see an end to both wars in our region, Israel and Palestine, Gaza and West Bank, and also the war in Ukraine and Russia. Now, we want to see an end to these wars as well as Turkey. President Erdogan personally knows President Trump from the past when they worked together in President Trump's first term. So in that sense, there is a personal relationship. We have President Erdogan has called President Trump during the election campaign when he had an attempt on his life. And after the election, when he won, during the election party, if you will, when he was together with his family, President Erdogan spoke with President-elect Trump. So there is the personal relationship. The teams are getting to know each other more and more. There are some points of concern for us, of course, in some things that we are hearing. But we are ready to work with the new administration as we have worked with past administrations. There's going to be differences on certain points of political points and policies regarding the region, regarding the world, regarding international institutions. But I think we are in a position to work with each other rather than work against each other, because we also have seen that in the past, the Trump administration has been also very open on some of the mistakes that the previous US administrations had done in relations with Turkey. Many issues that are on the table today have some sort of variations from the past. And of course, the capabilities in the defense industry of Turkey, technological developments in Turkey, the economical position that we are in, and the potential that Turkey has, both as a market but also as a producer, and as a country with which you can go to third countries, third-party investments that we can make. We have some of those from Europe, but I'm seeing also much more interest from the US. I had a trade delegation in Ankara in my office as a guest just not very far ago. They're also immensely interested in that. But there's one issue that I think we have to tackle from the beginning, and that is not only with the US administration, but also with the EU. We're talking about the EU, this visa issue regarding Turkish nationals. I know that there is a lot of potential for working together, both in industry, technology, and other things. But there is a sort of interesting process regarding the visa applications from Turkish nationals. But it's starting to shift. It's getting in a better position, and we'll continue to work on that. And that's something that we have to also work on together.
Well, Gaza, Ukraine, Lebanon, Syria, all areas that it looks like the new Trump administration, the Erdogan administration, probably can achieve better results working together than they can working alone. And hopefully we'll see more cooperation.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Ambassador Akif Çağatay Kılıç, the Foreign Policy and Security Advisor for Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, thank you for helping me review 2024 in Turkish foreign policy and also looking a sneak peek into 2025.
Thank you.
And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aram. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.